Okay, so welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today, we are going to be diving deep into something I think we all think about all the time.
Yeah.
Healthy
Especially
eating.
eating.
You see it everywhere you go. You scroll
Mm.
through articles. It's just an absolute barrage of information. The latest superfood.
Yeah.
What diet is everybody doing that's contradicting the diet that everybody was doing yesterday? It's so much.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to get lost in it all, you know?
Right.
You
Yep.
really can.
Yeah, and that's why we're here today.
Exactly.
We're going to cut through it all, and we've got some really great sources. We've got some really clear explanations from Healthline. We've got the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate, which is really helpful because it's visual.
Yeah.
We've got the global recommendations from the World Health Organization, and then we've got the really practical tips from Australia's Better Health channel.
Nice.
And we're going to try to give you, the listener, the most important, actionable information so you can feel confident about making healthy food choices.
And it's interesting because when you look at all of these different sources together, you start to see some common threads.
Yeah.
Some common principles, even if the way that they express them is varied a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump right in.
Yeah, okay.
So when we say healthy eating, what do we mean?
Well, Healthline gives us a good starting point. They say that healthy eating is primarily about nourishing your body with nutrient-rich foods. And I think one of the big takeaways right away is that it doesn't have to mean that you're subscribing to some specific diet.
I love that. I love that too, because I think when a lot of people hear the word diet, they're like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Like, what can't I have?
Yeah, exactly. It has this really negative connotation, restriction, and deprivation.
Right.
And that's not what we're going for.
Yeah, it's not really motivating, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah. Okay, so Healthline also points out that the specifics can vary depending on the individual, where you live, your finances, your culture, your taste.
Your access to certain types of foods is going to be very different if you live in,
Right.
rural America versus, if you live in a city.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone who can walk to a farmer's market is going to have a different experience than somebody who's going to a convenience store.
Exactly.
So that makes total sense.
And that brings us to this really important concept of nutrient density.
Okay.
Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. So Healthline describes nutrient density as the amount of nutrients in a food relative to its calories. So how much bang are you getting for your buck?
Yeah.
Nutritionally, right?
Right.
So it's not just about whether a food is low calorie or high calorie, because some very low calorie foods, like, think leafy greens,
Right.
can be incredibly nutrient dense. And some high calorie foods like nuts can also be incredibly nutrient dense.
Yeah.
So it's really just about making sure that the calories you're consuming are giving you back nutritionally as much as possible.
Yeah, so you're not just getting sort of empty calories, you're getting things that your body can really use.
Yeah. And Healthline gives us a good list of the types of foods that are really nutrient powerhouses. So things like vegetables,
Oh, yeah.
fruits, nuts, seeds, beans, fatty fish eggs.
Yeah, all the good stuff.
Things that are high in protein and fiber and healthy fats and vitamins and minerals.
Exactly.
So once you know what kind of foods you're looking for,
Okay.
what's next?
Well, then you need to think about how are you actually going to eat these things? How are you going to structure your diet, as it were?
Right.
And one thing that comes up consistently across the sources that we looked at is this idea of variety.
Oh, okay. So eat the rainbow, everybody.
Eat the rainbow. I've heard that so many times.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard that. But why is that so important?
Okay.
Well, Healthline points out a few really great benefits. A varied diet is going to help you support a healthy balance of bacteria in your gut.
Okay.
And we're learning more and more all the time about how important that gut bacteria is.
Yeah, it's like a whole ecosystem in there.
It really is. Yeah.
And it can help you to maintain a healthy weight. It's been linked to greater longevity and even protection against chronic diseases.
Wow. So it's like you're giving your body a full toolkit. If
Exactly.
it's getting a wide variety of nutrients.
A wide range of tools and things that it needs to be healthy.
So what about people who are picky eaters?
Yeah.
Like, what about people who don't like to try new things?
Well, Healthline has a really practical suggestion for this, they say, to introduce new foods gradually.
Okay.
And that might seem really obvious, but there's actually research that suggests that if you repeatedly expose yourself in a low-pressure kind of way
Okay.
to new tastes and textures,
Yeah.
you're more likely to end up liking them.
Oh, that's good to know, because I'm definitely somebody who kind of like falls back on the same
Yeah.
foods that I'm comfortable with, so I like that.
Yeah. So maybe don't try to overhaul your whole diet overnight.
Yeah.
Just incorporate one new thing here and there and No pressure to love it right away.
Yeah, just be open to it.
Exactly.
Okay, I like it.
So now let's talk about the macronutrients,
Okay.
carbohydrates, fats, and protein.
Okay.
How do these fit into the healthy eating picture?
Okay, so Healthline says that these are the main sources of energy that we get from our food, right?
Right.
And it's important to remember that fiber, which is so important for our health and digestion, is actually a type of carbohydrate,
That's right.
right? So it's not all bad.
No, not at all.
And they recommend that you try to have a balance of all three of those macronutrients in your meals and snacks.
And, for most people, they say that the most important thing isn't necessarily to be tracking the exact grams of each macronutrient,
Yeah.
but to just make sure that you're consistently getting some protein and some healthy fats,
Okay.
along with your fiber-rich carbohydrates, because that
Okay.
combination is really helpful for satiety.
Okay, so feeling full.
Feeling full and satisfied after you eat, so you're less likely to overeat later on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they give a really simple example, like you could have a piece of fruit, which has carbohydrates.
Right.
And you could pair that with some nut butter or a little bit of cheese.
Okay.
And that would give you some protein and some fat. And that would help to slow down the digestion of the sugar in the fruit.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just about what you're eating, it's about how you're combining things
Exactly.
to get the best result.
Exactly. And they do mention that some people might find that they do better on, slightly different ratios of macronutrients.
Yeah.
Maybe a lower carb approach or a lower fat approach.
Okay.
But for the vast majority of people, they say that getting really hung up on counting macronutrients isn't necessary.
Right.
And it can sometimes even be a little bit unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you think about it too much, maybe.
Exactly. It can take the joy out of eating.
Yeah. Okay, so then what about processed foods?
Yes.
Because it feels like processed foods are everywhere.
But they really are.
How do we manage that when we're trying to eat healthily?
Well, Healthline makes a really important distinction here. They say that there's a difference between processed foods and highly processed foods.
Okay.
So minimally processed foods, like canned beans or frozen fruits and vegetables, those can be really convenient and nutritious additions to a healthy diet.
Yeah, because sometimes that's all you have time for.
Exactly.
Yes.
But then there are the highly processed foods,
Okay.
and those are things like soda, sugary breakfast cereals,
Okay.
mass-produced baked goods,
Okay.
and those often have really long lists of ingredients, lots of artificial ingredients,
Yeah.
added sugar, unhealthy fats,
Okay.
and they don't really contain a lot of whole food components.
So it's not that processing is bad,
Right.
it's the level of processing.
Exactly. It's how much processing has been done and what's been added or removed during that process.
Okay. And I think across the board, everybody pretty much agrees that cutting back on those ultra-processed foods is a good idea.
Yeah, that seems to be the common consensus.
Okay. So now let's get into some practical strategies. Right.
For healthy eating.
Right.
Because I think that's what people want to know, right? Like, it's one thing to understand the why, but how do you actually do it?
Right. How do you put it into practice?
So Healthline says, make food a priority.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean you have to become some kind of gourmet chef.
Right.
But just be more intentional about the choices that you're making.
Yes.
And, shop for food regularly.
Yeah.
Make sure you have the ingredients you need.
Have a well-stocked kitchen. Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and they mentioned this rule of threes for meal planning. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the rule of threes, it's really simple. It just means that in each meal, you want to try to include a source of protein,
Okay.
a source of healthy fats, and fiber-rich carbohydrates.
Okay, and give us some examples of each of those categories.
So for protein, you could have things like lean meats, fish, eggs, beans, tofu.
Okay.
For healthy fats, avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil.
Okay.
And for those fiber-rich carbohydrates, you've got whole grains, fruits, vegetables, legumes. Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah, it's a really good framework
Yeah.
to start with.
So what if somebody is just feeling totally overwhelmed by the idea of changing their eating habits?
Yeah, that's understandable.
Like, what do they do?
Well, Healthline suggests starting small.
Okay.
So maybe you could focus on just one meal a day,
Okay.
like breakfast,
Okay.
and try to make that meal a little bit healthier. And then once you feel good about that, you can move on to another meal.
Okay. I like that kind of building on success.
Exactly. It's about building sustainable habits, not trying to be perfect overnight.
Right. Yeah. For progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
And Healthline also points out that it's important to develop a healthy relationship with food.
Yes, absolutely.
That's so huge.
It's so important.
Yeah.
And they caution against, restrictive diets and fad diets. And they say that if you're struggling with your relationship with food, it's important to seek guidance from, a registered dietitian
Yeah.
or a therapist who specializes in eating disorders.
Yeah, because food should be enjoyable.
It should be.
It shouldn't be stressful.
It should be a source of nourishment and pleasure.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, one practical tip that they offer is to cook more meals at home.
Okay.
That's going to help you to increase the variety in your diet. And it gives you a lot more control over the ingredients.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they emphasize this idea of progress, not perfection.
Yeah, we said that.
Yeah, and they say that if you're relying on cheat days, that might be a sign that your everyday eating pattern isn't sustainable.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because if you feel like you need a cheat day
Yeah.
to kind of blow off steam,
Yeah.
then maybe your everyday eating isn't quite where it needs to be.
Yeah, maybe you need to kind of recalibrate
Exactly.
and find something that feels good all the time.
Yeah, something that feels good and that you can stick with.
Yeah, okay. I like that.
Hmm.
What about hydration?
Hydration is super important,
Yeah.
and Healthline says water is the best choice.
Yeah.
So they suggest keeping a reusable water bottle with you.
Okay.
And you can add slices of fruit or cucumber
Okay.
to your water if you want a little bit of flavor.
Sure.
And they also say, honor your food dislikes.
Uh,
You don't have to force yourself to eat something you don't like.
Yeah.
Just because it's healthy.
so I can stop pretending to like kale.
You can if you don't like it.
All right, that's good to know.
And as always, they recommend consulting with a registered dietitian if you want personalized advice.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of these visual representations of healthy eating, starting with the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate.
Okay, yeah, the Healthy Eating Plate, this is a great tool.
It's so simple.
It is. It's a
Yeah.
really simple visual for creating balanced, healthy meals.
Yeah.
Basically, it divides your plate into different sections.
Okay.
And it shows you, how much of each type of food you should be aiming for.
Okay, so what are the proportions?
All right, so about half of your plate should be vegetables and fruits.
Okay.
And they really emphasize variety here.
Okay.
So lots of different colors.
Like the rainbow.
Like the rainbow, exactly.
Mm.
And interestingly, they say that potatoes don't count toward that half of your plate
Oh, interesting.
because they have a bigger impact on blood sugar.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know.
So then the other half of the plate is split into 2 quarters.
Okay.
1 quarter is for whole grains.
Okay.
So things like whole wheat bread, brown rice, quinoa, oats.
Got it.
And the other quarter is for healthy protein sources.
Okay.
So fish, poultry, beans, nuts.
Okay.
They say to limit red and processed meats.
Yeah, I've been hearing that a lot lately.
Yeah, it seems to be the consensus.
Okay, so what about fats?
Right, so the Healthy Eating Plate recommends using healthy oils in moderation for cooking and salad dressings.
Okay, so like olive oil, canola oil, that kind of thing?
Exactly. And they say to avoid trans fats.
Okay.
And they also point out that just choosing low-fat options isn't necessarily the answer,
Oh, okay.
because sometimes those low-fat products are high in sugar
Oh, interesting.
or refined carbohydrates to make up for the lack of fat.
Okay, so you really have to read the labels.
You really do.
Okay, what about drinks? What should we be drinking?
So water, coffee, and tea with little or no sugar are the best choices.
Okay.
They recommend limiting milk and dairy to 1 to 2 servings per day and juice to a small glass.
Okay.
And they say to avoid sugary drinks altogether.
Yeah, that seems to be the consistent message.
It really does.
Okay, and I always notice on that plate there's like a little running figure on the side,
Yeah.
which I think is a nice reminder that physical activity is important too.
Absolutely.
You know?
It's all part of the picture.
It all works together.
It does.
So the healthy eating plate really emphasizes diet quality
Yes.
over just the amount of carbs or fat that you're consuming.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's zoom out even more
Okay.
and talk about the global recommendations for healthy eating from the World Health Organization.
All right.
So what do they say?
Well, the WHO really stresses that a healthy diet is fundamental for good health. And it helps to protect against all kinds of chronic diseases like heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers.
Yeah, that's huge.
It is.
Okay.
And they say that people should eat a variety of foods
Okay.
and limit their intake of salt, sugar, and unhealthy fats.
All right, so what kind of diet are they recommending specifically?
They say that infants should be breastfed
Okay.
early on in life,
Okay.
and that people should eat a diet that includes staple foods like cereals or starchy roots,
All right.
plenty of legumes, lots of fruits and vegetables,
Okay.
and some foods from animal sources.
Okay. And we know that fruits and vegetables are really important because they're packed with those essential vitamins and minerals and fiber and antioxidants,
Yes.
and they've been linked to a lower risk of many of those chronic diseases that we were just talking about.
Exactly.
So the WHO, what do they say about fats?
So they recommend that people reduce their overall fat intake.
Okay.
And they say that unsaturated vegetable oils, like olive oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil,
Okay.
those are better than saturated fats,
Which are in,
which are found in fatty meats and dairy products,
right?
and trans fats, which are often found in processed foods.
Okay.
And they say that your total fat intake should be less than 30% of your total energy intake.
30%. Okay, what about sugar?
So they recommend that you limit your intake of free sugars to less than 10% of your total energy intake,
Okay.
and ideally less than 5%
Okay.
for additional health benefits.
Yeah.
And they say, choose fresh fruit over sugary snacks
Okay.
and limit your intake of sugary drinks.
Okay. What about salt?
So they recommend reducing your salt intake to less than 5 grams a day
Okay.
for adults to help prevent high blood pressure and
Okay.
reduce the risk of heart disease and stroke.
Yeah, okay. And they say that a lot of the salt that we eat comes from packaged and processed foods.
Exactly.
So just being mindful of that.
Yeah, reading the labels.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's look at the guidelines from Australia's Better Health Channel.
Right.
So what do they have to say?
Well, they have these things called the Australian Dietary Guidelines and the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating.
Yeah, okay.
And they say that you should be eating a wide variety of nutritious foods from 5 main food groups every day.
Okay, in recommended amounts.
That's right.
So what are those 5 food groups?
All right, so they are vegetables and legumes or beans,
Okay.
fruit,
Okay.
lean meats, and poultry fish eggs, tofu nuts, seeds, and legumes or beans.
Okay, so there's some overlap there.
Yeah, there is, because some of those foods kind of fit into multiple categories.
Got it.
Then there's grain foods, mostly whole grain and high fiber varieties.
Okay.
And milk, yogurt, cheese, and their alternatives, mostly reduced fat.
Okay, so those are the 5.
Yes.
And do they also address the foods that are not in those 5 food groups?
They do. They call them discretionary foods. Sometimes they refer to them as junk foods.
Okay.
And they say that these should be limited because they tend to be high in saturated fat, added sugars, salt, and alcohol,
Yeah.
and low in nutrients.
So things like cakes, biscuits, processed meat. Yes. Takeaway food, sugary drinks.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah, but not good for you.
Right, not so good for you.
Okay.
But they do give some tips on how to make healthier choices when you are eating out or getting takeaway.
Oh, that's good because I feel like that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, it can be tricky,
Yeah.
especially, if you're busy.
Yeah. So what are their suggestions?
Well, they say you should choose grilled or baked options over fried foods,
Okay.
add extra vegetables to your meal, opt for smaller portion sizes,
Okay.
and be mindful of sauces and dressings because those can often be really high in fat, sugar, and salt.
Yeah. You don't even think about that sometimes.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
And they really emphasize that high sugar foods and drinks contribute to weight gain
Yeah.
and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
And they say that water is the healthiest drink.
So we're hearing that a lot today.
We are.
What about alcohol and salt?
Okay, so they recommend drinking alcohol in moderation. And they give some guidelines on what a standard drink size is.
Okay.
And for salt, they point out that a lot of the salt that we eat comes from packaged and processed foods.
Yeah.
So they say to limit your intake of those.
Okay. And they also talk about the importance of healthy fats,
They do.
which is interesting.
Yeah, they say that it's important to include small amounts of healthy fats each day.
Okay.
Things like olive oil, avocado nuts, oily fish.
Okay.
And those are important for vitamin absorption and heart health.
Good.
And they recommend replacing saturated fats with unsaturated fats whenever possible.
Got it.
And they do give some general guidance on how much you should be eating from each food group each day,
Yeah.
but they point out that it really depends on the individual.
So it's not one size fits all.
Exactly. It depends on your age, your gender, how active you are.
Okay.
So, for example, they give some recommendations for vegetables, fruits, and grain foods,
Okay.
but the specific amounts vary from person to person.
Okay, so what I think is really helpful is the practical tips that they give for changing your eating habits.
Yeah, they have some really good ones.
So what are some of their top tips?
Well, they say don't try to do everything at once.
Okay.
Start small
Okay.
and make gradual changes.
Yeah.
They say that healthy eating can be budget friendly.
Yep.
If you shop around and compare prices,
Okay.
they encourage you to experiment with new recipes
Okay.
to find healthy fast food options
Okay.
for those busy days when you don't have a lot of time to cook.
Yeah.
Be mindful of kilojoule labeling when you're eating out.
Okay.
Adapt your favorite recipes to be healthier.
Okay.
And reduce your portion sizes.
Yeah, those are all good tips.
Yeah, they're really practical.
Yeah, and any tips for staying organized?
Oh, yeah. They say make a shopping list.
Okay.
Keep a bowl of fruit out on the counter,
Okay.
so you're more likely to snack on that.
Yeah.
Vary your meals throughout the week.
Okay.
Explore online resources for healthy recipes. Cook in bulk.
Okay.
And make sure you eat breakfast. They also say you should stock your pantry and fridge with some quick and easy healthy ingredients.
Okay.
So they suggest things like soups, pasta, rice beans, vegetables, canned fish, healthy condiments.
Go.
And they also have some really great budget-friendly tips.
Okay.
They say cook extra and freeze leftovers. Buy in bulk when you can.
Okay.
Shop at markets, use cheaper cuts of meat,
Okay.
and add more vegetables to your meals.
Okay.
Make one-pot dishes, watch for sales limit takeaway, and buy seasonal produce.
Okay, those are all really good tips.
They are.
Okay, so we covered a lot of information today.
We did.
What would you say are the key takeaways from all of these different expert sources?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that healthy eating is about balanced variety.
Yeah.
And choosing nutrient-dense whole foods.
Okay.
It's not about restrictive diets.
Yeah.
It's about creating sustainable habits
Yeah.
that you can stick with for the long term.
Right. Progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
So it's really those small, consistent changes that make the biggest difference.
That's
Okay, so, listener, I'm going to leave you with a thought. Think about one small change that you can make today to your eating habits based on what we talked about. Maybe you could start prioritizing nutrient-dense foods or cutting back on processed foods just a little bit. How do you think that one small change could affect your health and well-being in the long run?
That's a great question.
And as always, we encourage you to check out the resources that we mentioned for more detailed information.
Yes.
And talk to your healthcare provider or a registered dietitian for personalized advice.
Exactly.
So thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next time.
See you later.